Rachel, let's talk about your latest piece in Politico magazine titled, Trump is leaning on crime, which you just said. Democrats need a better response and fast. So, yeah, tell us more about what you found, because as Ali was reporting back on what Democrats were excited about, what they've done over the past 6 months, one was a Texas redistricting move that didn't do anything. The second was Cory Booker talking for a real long time on the Senate floor, which didn't do anything. Let's talk about crime. And first thing I always ask is, if somebody's coming at me with an issue, how do I, take the issue away from them and reply in a stronger way? And, what's the Democrats' answer to that? If they're not going to be supporting more, like Bill Clinton, 100,000 cops on the street, what's the Democrats' response?
Well, you would think they would sort of use the opportunity to say, look, we're not soft on crime. You're accusing us of being soft on crime. We're not. We're going to call for more police officers. We're going to call for sort of an end to various decriminalization efforts that we've seen across the country since the 2020 George Floyd protests. There was sort of this movement to sort of back off a number of prosecutions. Voters have shown that they do not support that movement and actually have pushed back in Democratic areas like Portland, like New York, like Chicago. So you would think Democrats would sort of attack this issue that way. But I've got to say, you're not seeing a lot of leaders. And I mean, from a purely political standpoint, Donald Trump on this issue believes he has the upper hand. And I think you're seeing that right now. I mean, we see a lot of Democrats talking about how, oh, this is authoritarian, right? But look, voters don't like overtly partisan power grabs, sure. But there's one thing they don't like even more, and that is feeling unsafe in their own neighborhoods. I mean, crime is a top issue for voters, especially in recent years, and it traditionally favors Republicans in their sort of tough on crime response. I mean, you guys have talked about how you think voters in New York believe crime is coming down, but if you look at polling nationwide, that is actually not the case. I mean, I was just looking at a poll yesterday, or I guess the day before when I was writing this piece, found that 70% of Americans thought crime was just as bad right now as it had been in recent years, or is actually getting worse, and something like 20% actually thought it was coming down. So when you think about voters and how they feel right now, Trump is really leaning in and sort of latching on to those fears, changing the subject away from things like Medicaid cuts or, the midterms being a referendum on him. He's trying to move it back to crime. And I mean, you asked panelists, does he have the authority to do this, to go to Chicago, to put the National Guard in New York? I would contend that it's not about winning this fight. It's about the fight itself. He wants to be the one to tell voters, I'm tough on crime. What are you going to do? And what Democrats are doing right now is saying, oh, you don't have the authority and crime is down. That doesn't resonate with people. Yeah. You have to have specific solutions about how you're going to protect their communities.
Yeah, Politico's Rachel Bade, thank you so much. And you can write your latest article in Politico Online, available right now. So, Willie, here's the deal, and it's just trying to help Democrats, because I'm a nice guy here. I got to help Republicans if they needed help and weren't doing what they were doing every day.
They were being actually
But here's the thing. You can't just say Donald Trump's an authority, and be scared about it. You have to say he's acting like an authoritarian. And what he's talking about doing is not going to fix your crime problem. It's not going to make your streets safer. It's not going to make your kids' schools safer. Not going to make your walk to church safer. It's not going to do anything but make his political base stronger. What we need are more cops on the street. What we need is an environment that allow you to walk down to the subway and feel safe, allow you to go into a CVS store and not have to ask the person behind the counter to get the toothpaste and the Rolaids from behind the plastic, separator, help people have this sense. Because when we sit here and talk about crime rates are lower than they've been in 60 years, it sounds a lot like what I was saying and other people were saying before the election about the economy. Our economy is stronger relative to the rest of the world than any time since 1945. People don't feel it. It ain't true. I mean, if people don't feel it, as Henry Kissinger said, in politics, perception's reality. Well, the perception right now is not caught up to where the crime rates are.
Well, Karl Rove joins you in that chorus. He was warning yesterday, Democrats, be careful around this crime issue. There is a good answer to the question, like the one we asked Mayor Johnson of Chicago yesterday, and so far he hasn't heard most Democrats giving the answer, sort of echoing what you're saying here. So, David French, the question is then for Democrats, and you can offer some free political advice too if you'd like to, what is the way through this? We have heard Governor Moore, Governor Pritzker, Governor Newsom saying we welcome partnership, we welcome more cops, we want people in our streets to feel safe, but we're not doing it his way. We're not going to have troops walking down the streets of Baltimore and Chicago and Los Angeles.
I mean, you have to use the truth to blow up his narrative. And the truth is this, that people forget he was president in 2020. And when crime really exploded, when violent crime really exploded in a way that was terrifying and dangerous, it happened in 2020 in his presidency, his first term. Ever since 2020, I think Democrats could say we've been dealing with the fallout and we've been trying to wrestle and bring this under control and have had a lot of success. You can look at declining crime rates in the Biden term. These declines have continued in this year. So there has been a story of success to say he was in charge when this blew up, and we've been dealing with the fallout ever since. And the other thing you got to say is not just that this military deployment is authoritarian. A lot of people don't think in those terms. Another thing you can say is this military deployment is bad for the military. This is something that is diverting it from its mission. If you think that this was the most effective way of dealing with crime, then why haven't all these red state governors called out their National Guards in their cities that have much higher crime rates than many of the cities that Trump is talking about? The reason they haven't done it is because the National Guard is not a crime-fighting organization. This is bad from the military. It's diverting it from its main mission. We're the ones getting crime under control after it blew up under Donald Trump. And then explain to voters how you're doing it. And then one thing you have to deal with is public disorder. It's not just about armed robberies and violent crime. It's about the sense that when I'm walking out, I'm on the subway or I'm in a park, are there going to be people around me? Is there going to be an atmosphere that feels dangerous around me because people are acting in a way that's out of control? And I think a lot of Democrats have underestimated just the way in which public disorder is very unsettling to people. And to make that a priority of dealing with public disorder, I think until they do that, a lot of the arguments are going to fall flat.
Yeah, it is very interesting what we just heard. That for some reason, people forget Donald Trump was president in 2020.
Always.
Why is that? Ron DeSantis, I think it was Ron DeSantis on Fox News a couple days ago. And he's talking about, of course, Joe Biden in 2020. It's like, no, Joe Biden wasn't president in 2020. Joe Biden wasn't president when there was chaos in the streets. Joe Biden wasn't president when the American streets were more chaotic than any time since 1968. How is it that everybody, it happens all the time on right-wing talk shows. They're like, yeah, in 2020, thanks, Biden. Well, Joe Biden wasn't in the White House in 2020. That was Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, you know something, that's a huge issue, the national attention span. It's about a second long. People don't remember what happened last week, 2 weeks ago. Never mind 2020.
Yeah.
And Trump capitalizes
He does.
on it. But on this issue of crime, I mean, the vast majority of Americans have never been mugged, assaulted, robbed, carjacked, or attempted to be killed by someone. But they come home, they watch the TV news, their local TV news. If it bleeds, it leads. That has never changed. Right. If there's a murder in the area, it's going to be up there right at the top of the news. If there's a mugging, a serious mugging, a kidnapping, whatever, it's going to be right at the top of the news. But even given that sense of security that they seem to feel they're losing, the Democrats continually fail to speak to the issue in normal human terms.
They really do. And again, we've gone down the list already. But really, things are so dangerous that you have to put Rolaids and toothpaste and Listerine behind plastic. I mean, because it'll be stolen. Like, people can't walk down the street again. If somebody walks down the street, let's talk about crime stats really quickly before we wrap this up. And by the way, Ron DeSantis blamed Donald Trump blamed Joe Biden in 2020 for shortchanging Florida in the 2020 census. But if their kid can't walk down the street without somebody coming up screaming in their face, that won't be recorded as a crime. It's unfortunately, it's a poor man or a woman that has mental health difficulties that are living out on the
That's
streets.
why the services that were cut in the Republican bill are very needed.
Yeah, they're needed, of course, which we've been saying now for 2 days. Yeah, and so they're very needed. So, but still, your child comes home and says there was a guy or a woman that was screaming at me at the top of my lungs. I got scared and then I ran and da 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 da. Like, there's no sense of security there, and that's what, again, Democrats need to get their arms around that and stop saying everything's fine.
You have to address the feeling of not being secure. I grew up in Brownsville, East Flatbush, Brooklyn. We had 3 locks on the door and a bar against the door. And I'm out there marching, but we wanted to be safe. What the Democrats ought to be saying is, yes, crime has been a problem. We've successfully done this, but we need more help. We're glad you want to weigh in, Mr. President, so we can not only cut it down to where we need to cut it down more. Bringing untrained National Guardsmen that do not understand this is not the way to do it. Help us get more trained police that have done community policing, because that's what's worked, because you're absolutely right. We've got to deal with crime. Do the Muhammad Ali strategy, rope-a-dope.
Right.
Lean against the rope, take the blows, and say, now, come on now, let's do this together. And he will not know how to answer that.
All right, coming up, a look at some of the other stories making headlines this morning, including the company that's building record profits brick by brick. We'll explain that straight ahead. And as we head to
What's that?
break.
We'll have to wait and see.
I can't.
Yeah.
Another great team.
It's called a team.